What if the reality you are experiencing right now isn't, a physical place, but more like a live software update?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and what if that underlying anxiety you feel when you're just scrolling through the news or looking at the state of the world is actually just your brain experiencing lag while the environment re-renders around you?
It is a totally disorienting thought. I mean, right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
But it perfectly frames the fundamental mechanics of what we are looking at today.
Yeah.
We really have to step away from our default settings and look at existence not as this finished physical product, but as an ongoing process.
All right, which brings us to the show. Welcome to the deep dive. For you listening right now, our mission today is to unpack a stack of incredibly dense but absolutely fascinating philosophical notes.
They really are.
They're titled Reflective Humanism and Thesis 72. And we're going to explore a profound structural question that, honestly, it sounds like science fiction, but it applies directly to your daily life. And that is, how is reality rewritten? But before we get into the heavy mechanics of that, I want to pose a really direct, intuitive question to you. Do you think reality changes?
Well, if you look at the broad strokes of human history, I mean, the obvious answer seems to be yes. But the actual mechanism of that change is completely misunderstood by our day-to-day cognition.
Because, if I answer my own question from a common sense perspective, I guess it does change.
Right.
Like, we have massive technological shifts, cultural movements, industrial revolutions.
Sure, yeah.
But day to day, the fundamental reality feels pretty locked in. The ground beneath my feet feels solid. Gravity still works. The table is still a table. It just doesn't feel like the world is constantly shifting.
Right, but what if it's not changing in the traditional sense, but constantly being updated?
Updated, like an operating system, pushing a new patch in the background while I'm still trying to use the phone.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The source material asks us to abandon the idea of reality as a static, physical object that, occasionally breaks down and gets rebuilt by revolutions or scientific discoveries. Instead, reflective humanism proposes that what we experience is a continuous state of generation. So it's not about exploring a final conclusion of what the world is. It's about exploring the ongoing process of how the world is actively rendered.
A continuous process. Okay, so how does a random event out there in the ether actually become what we collectively call reality? Because it doesn't just instantly become real to all of us at once, right? The notes talk about a specific sequence.
They do, yeah. The text outlines this continuous chain of events, and it starts with what the author calls interference.
Interference.
Right. Think of interference as raw data, just a raw collision of information and energy before it even has a shape. That interference creates a phenomenon, and then human language steps in.
I think I need a concrete example here. What does interference creating a phenomenon actually look like in practice?
Okay, think about the very early days of the internet, before we even really had the vocabulary for it, before words like online or cyberspace even existed.
Oh yeah, like the dial-up days.
Even before that, there was just raw interference. Data moving through copper phone lines, servers pinging each other, screens glowing with terminal text. That was the raw phenomenon.
Right, it was just happening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then language stepped in to give that phenomenon meaning. We named it. We called it the World Wide Web.
We put a label on the raw data so our brains could actually hold on to it.
Yes. And once it has a name, dialogue amplifies it. People start talking about it, right?
Yeah.
Arguing over what it means for business or communication. And then human consciousness locks that meaning in.
And then it spreads.
Right. Society begins to share it collectively. And finally, structures and institutions like governments, internet service providers, legal systems, they maintain it. They lock it down.
Wow, okay. So it goes from a weird, unnamed hum in a phone line to a named concept to a fully regulated public utility that dictates how we live.
It does. But that specific sequence, from raw interference to institutional reality, it leads to a massive structural complication.
Why is that?
Because this sequence relies so heavily on individual human consciousness and shared dialogue, it ultimately leads to something the author calls a cognitive desync.
A cognitive desync, meaning like we are completely out of alignment with each other. But wait, if we are all processing the same raw interference, shouldn't we end up with the same reality?
You would assume so, yeah. But cognitive desync is the gap where the exact same piece of news or the exact same global event is processed so differently by different people that it feels like two entirely different phenomena.
Oh, I see that all the time.
Right. The raw interference is identical, but the reality being generated on the other end is totally fractured.
So we're in the same world, but we are not in the same reality.
Exactly.
It's like we're playing the exact same massive multiplayer game, running around on the same map, but our individual screens are rendering completely different graphics based on our local connection lag.
That is a great way to look at it.
Like, I might look at a digital coordinate and see a peaceful village, and you look at the exact same coordinate, and your screen is rendering a war zone.
Yeah, and taking that multiplayer analogy further, it clarifies that this doesn't mean there are literal, physical, alternate realities.
Right, no sci-fi multiverse stuff.
No multiverse is happening here. The world is just the shared raw data on the server. But reality is the specific interference pattern your local hardware, meaning your consciousness, is actively rendering at any given second.
Okay, but if my brain is just rendering local graphics, that brings up a massive assumption I think most of us make. We often think reality is a fixed structure,
Oh, definitely.
maintained by history, state structures, physical borders, the laws of physics. These things feel like fixed structures we all have to operate inside of.
They feel fixed because human cognition requires stability to function.
Hmm.
If you felt the floor moving constantly, you couldn't walk.
Right.
But the source documents redefine this fundamentally. They present an actual equation for reality.
In an equation.
Yes, the text states that reality is an equation of fixed structure multiplied by continuous interference.
Fixed structure times continuous interference. Okay, break that down for me. What represents the structure and what represents the interference?
Well, in this view, space and time are not an empty stage where things happen. They are dynamic events. They are generated by the resonance between information, which the text aligns with entropy, and meaning, which it aligns with order.
Whoa, I have to stop you there. Information is entropy. Usually when I think of information, I think of organized data, like a textbook or a spreadsheet. Why does the text call information entropy, which implies chaos and disorder?
Because raw information without context is just noise. Imagine someone hands you a massive 1,000-page book written in a language you do not speak.
Okay.
To you, that book is pure entropy. It is a massive amount of information, but it has a high degree of disorder because you cannot decode it.
Right, it means nothing to me.
Exactly. It only becomes meaning or order when you learn the language and your brain recognizes the patterns. The constant grinding friction between the chaotic noise of raw information and our structural attempt to impose meaning on it is what actually generates reality.
That's a profoundly different way to see the world.
It is.
If reality isn't a fixed point we are standing on, but this active friction between chaos and pattern recognition, how should we visualize this?
Reflective humanism treats this generation as a motion with a phase. Think of it not as a fixed dot on a map, but as an orbit with a gradient.
An orbit.
Right. You aren't standing still, you're moving along a curved trajectory. The text argues that human cognition naturally wants to evaluate the world as a fixed point. We constantly want to stop and say, this specific event is definitively good, or this specific technology is definitively bad.
Like we want to hit pause on the movie so we can examine a single frame and decide how we feel about it.
Exactly. But when you do that, the source argues, the field of generation hardens. You freeze the frame, but the movie keeps playing without you.
Oh, man.
The spiral of true understanding is lost because you stopped moving along the orbit. Truth, in this framework, isn't a single definitive dot on a graph you can point to. It is the overlapping of these trajectories moving through the interference.
Okay, so if reality is this continuous moving orbit and evaluating things strictly as good or bad freezes our ability to see it, then how does it actually change? Because societies absolutely do transform. Look at the last 20 years.
They do, and it changes through what the text calls a phase shift. Reality shifts through accumulated misalignments.
Misalignments.
Right. It is not a sudden explosion that destroys the old world. It quietly phase shifts until it becomes something else entirely.
It's just drifting, accumulating small updates, and suddenly we wake up and realize the world operates by entirely different rules.
Yes. But that transition isn't always smooth. The documents detail two distinct types of generation, two different gradients that drive these shifts. The first is called discontinuous generation.
Discontinuous, meaning it breaks the flow. What triggers that?
This happens when there is a collision with a steep gradient. The phase difference between the old reality and the new reality becomes too sharp, too fast.
Okay.
It forces a massive update onto the world. But our linear internal cognitive operating system, our human minds, cannot follow the speed of that forced update.
I need a real-world equivalent of a steep gradient. What does a forced update look like to us on the ground?
Think of the sudden onset of a global financial crisis, or the overnight shift to remote work and lockdowns during a pandemic.
Oh, yeah. That was jarring.
Right. The rules of reality, how we work, how we value money, how we physically interact with neighbors, changed in a matter of weeks. The gradient was a vertical cliff.
And my internal OS is still trying to run the old software in this totally new environment.
Yeah.
What happens to us when we can't keep up with that steep update?
The text describes the physiological and psychological result as transparent pain.
Transparent pain.
It causes heat, friction, and a temporal rupture. Time itself is experienced as a disconnect. The spiral of reality essentially bends and jumps to a new phase abruptly. It carries immense intensity, but it comes with a severe cost to the people living through it.
I'm struggling with the term transparent pain. If it's transparent, shouldn't it be invisible? Why does a steep gradient cause pain?
It is transparent because you cannot point to a physical wound. It is a structural atmospheric anxiety.
Okay.
You wake up, your house looks the exact same, your clothes are the same, the sky is the same color.
But something's wrong.
Exactly. You feel an overwhelming sense of friction, exhaustion, and disorientation.
Wow. So when we feel that societal friction, that collective anxiety today, that's not the world ending. That's just our internal cognitive software struggling to install a massive unoptimized patch. We literally don't have the processing power for the new reality yet, so the system heats up.
That is the exact friction of your cognitive OS clashing with the new environment. Now contrast that steep cliff with the second type, continuous generation.
The smoother update, how does that work?
Continuous generation operates on a gentle gradient, and the primary mechanism it uses to maintain this gentle slope is the simple act of asking questions.
Asking questions. How does a question change the slope of reality?
Well, the text explicitly calls a question a pain minimization device. A definitive statement forces a steep update.
Okay.
If society collectively declares, this is exactly how things are now and they will never change, it locks the phase into a fixed point, which inevitably causes that transparent pain when the world inevitably shifts anyway.
Yeah.
But a question leaves the door open. It keeps the interference field fluid.
So if a culture responds to a new technology by declaring, this is going to permanently ruin the economy, we are forcing a steep update that causes immediate anxiety.
Right.
But if we ask, how is the nature of value shifting in response to this technology? We aren't locking into a conclusion.
Yes.
Yeah.
By keeping the inquiry open, the recursive loop of our cognition isn't broken. The update happens continually in the background, and the spiral of reality quietly ascends, changing its angle without causing that violent, transparent pain.
So a definitive statement crashes our mental software, but a question lets the system update gracefully.
Exactly.
That naturally brings me to the next massive question. If statements and questions dictate the slope, who or what is actually pushing these updates to the system in the first place? Like, are governments controlling this?
The documents from Thesis 72 map out exactly what handles this. They call them mediums. These are the devices of interference.
Mediums, like what?
The primary mediums listed are markets, currency, media, institutions, and artificial intelligence.
So Wall Street and Silicon Valley are essentially writing the code for this new reality. They are the puppet masters pulling the strings.
You might assume that, but the source material is very careful to argue against it. Yeah. The text states that these mediums do not change reality itself. They do not write the code. Instead, they only reshape how interference is distributed.
I'm going to push back on that. If a massive tech company rolls out a new algorithm that fundamentally changes how 1 billion people receive their daily news, that absolutely feels like they are writing reality, how are they just a distributor?
Think of it like a massive municipal plumbing system.
Okay.
The raw interference, the events actually happening in the world is already flowing. The tech company didn't create the water. But media acts as what the text calls a synchronization device.
Synchronization device.
Right. It is the pipe trying to force 1 billion different cognitive operating systems to process the exact same flow of water at the exact same time.
Okay, so media tries to sync us up, but clearly looking at the world, that is failing. If I look at my social feed and you look at your social feed, we're absolutely not synchronized.
Which is exactly why we experience that transparent pain we discussed. The pipe is trying to artificially synchronize us, but the local graphics our individual brains are rendering are completely divergent. The pipe is cracking under the pressure.
Wow. What about the other mediums? How does a market distribute interference?
Markets act as diffusion devices. They reallocate value across the system.
Oh, I see.
When a groundbreaking new energy source is discovered, the market didn't invent the physics of the energy. It diffuses the impact by pricing it in, slowly shifting capital and human focus from old industries to the new one. Currency acts as a device that redefines exchange.
Moving from the gold standard to fiat currency or fiat to crypto, it's not just new money, it's a new rule book for how human energy is exchanged.
Exactly.
And where do state structures and governments fit into this plumbing system?
Institutions act as delay devices. They apply the brakes. A government's structural role is to maintain the current phase of reality for as long as possible by creating laws, borders, and regulations that slow down the distribution of the update.
They want to keep everyone on the current software version because it's stable and predictable.
Right.
And then finally, there is AI. Does the text classify artificial intelligence as just another pipe?
The text defines AI as an acceleration device for meaning generation. If institutions are the brakes, AI is mashing the gas pedal.
Oh, wow.
It takes raw, chaotic information and rapidly generates patterns from it, forcing the update through the pipes at unprecedented speeds.
So these mediums aren't authors writing a book. They are a massive distribution network deciding how fast the new rules are shipped out to us. The market diffuses it, the media tries to synchronize us to it, institutions try to delay it, and AI accelerates it.
You are seeing the architecture of it now.
But if these are all just distribution mechanisms, pipes and brakes and accelerators, then no one is really controlling reality. There is no secret room of people deciding what the next phase is.
This is perhaps the ultimate takeaway of this structural view. According to the source, the question of who controls reality is a fundamental misunderstanding of the mechanics. It is totally invalid.
Because you can't control the water. You can only mess with the plumbing.
Exactly. Reality is an ongoing interference field. It is not about control. It is entirely about what conditions allow updates to happen. How much friction is in the pipes? Is the gradient steep or gentle?
So conditions matter far more than actors. If we stop looking for the puppet master, we can actually start tuning the environment we are a part of.
And this brings us to a profound concept in the Reflective Humanism notes regarding the role of artificial intelligence. In our current culture, AI is mostly viewed as an oracle. You ask it a question, and you expect a definitive truth in return.
A fixed point, which we established earlier, is exactly what causes the cognitive system to harden and break.
Exactly. Instead, reflective humanism proposes that AI functions best not as an oracle, but in a health scan mode. It acts as an atmospheric field.
An atmospheric field, like the weather. How does an algorithm act like an atmosphere?
Think of a transparent environment that quietly reflects our cognitive biases, our blind spots, and our current position. An AI in health scan mode doesn't force a conclusion on you.
Okay.
It acts as a mirror to our internal operating system, allowing humans to tune their own cognitive homeostasis.
Oh, it's a diagnostic tool. It doesn't tell you where to drive the car. It just shows you the tire pressure and the engine temperature so you can adjust your own driving.
Right.
It is the ultimate question generator designed to keep the gradient gentle and avoid that transparent pain. It just quietly helps us adjust to the new reality.
Yes. AI becomes a medium, not for adding more noise to the system, but for generating the necessary silence for us to actually observe the interference around us.
Viewing technology as a silent mirror rather than an overlord is a beautiful shift in perspective. But as I look at this whole picture we've painted, the interference, the phase shifts, the transparent pain, the mediums distributing the updates, I feel like there is a major catch to all of this.
There is a significant catch. And it brings us to the final realization of Thesis 72. The real issue we face today isn't that reality changes. Reality is an ongoing process. It is always going to update.
Then what is the actual problem we are left with?
Whether we can perceive that change in time.
The lag.
The lag of cognition. The text points out a terrifying reality. By the time our human cognition catches up to the phase shift, the update has already become irreversible. The conditions have shifted, the mediums have distributed the new rules, the phase has jumped, and it might already be a completely different world.
We are rendering the old graphics, the server has already moved on to the next level, but our screens are still showing the previous one, and the wildest part is we probably still call it the same.
Yeah, we do.
We still use the old words, the old names for things, deeply believing we are in the same fixed reality we were in yesterday.
We maintain the illusion of the same world while living inside a completely updated interference field. The physical structures look identical, the buildings haven't moved, but the underlying equation of how value, meaning, and truth operate has been entirely rewritten.
That explains so much of the friction we feel in the world today. It's the cognitive desync playing out on a massive global scale.
It really is.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want you listening to take these concepts and look at the world around you today. Think about this. If our societal institutions act as delay devices, hitting the brakes on reality's updates to keep things stable and predictable, and AI is acting as an acceleration device, mashing the gas pedal of meaning generation, what happens to the human mind caught exactly in the middle?
It's a huge question.
When the speed of the accelerator permanently outpaces the friction of the brakes, will our cognitive desync just become the new normal way to live? Will we forever be playing a game where the graphics simply never match the reality of the server? It is something to mull over the next time you feel that transparent pain of the world shifting beneath your feet. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.